Welcome to part 2, The Betrayal of a Generation. If you haven't seen part 1, go ahead and go to my YouTube channel and give it a watch through. Or, if you want to start in the middle of the story, go ahead and give this a listen. Section 4, Elites versus the Masses. Rome had plebs and patricians. We have the masses and the managerial class. They ruled from marble halls, while our managerial class rules from data centers, capital funds, and social algorithms. But both ruled by one principle: control the masses, feed them enough not to rise, distract them enough not to think. And when the system started to crack, they didn't protect the people. They protected their portfolios. See, populism rises when the bottom realizes that the elite has lied. And today, that lie is unraveling. We were told, go to college and you'll succeed. Work hard and you'll thrive. Trust the experts and they'll keep you safe. Instead, college became debt bondage. Work became gig economy scraps, degrading roles, absent of respect and honor. And the experts lied, again and again. Not just through incompetence, but with conceit and contempt for the people. They partied while your life was shattered, they indulged while you went without, and they laughed while you suffered. They prided themselves for their wisdom, while you were humiliated and shamed for existing. What follows next is not condemnation, it is grief. Let's talk first about young men. Cut down before growth. See, young men were told they were privileged, even as they became the most disposable class in the empire. Lowest college attendance, passed over by equity initiatives, and quietly filtered out of institutions that now treat masculinity like a threat. Highest suicide rates, often with no mental health indicators. They did it not because of mental health, but because of real-world issues in their life. Mass unemployment, but not the kind that makes headlines. The quiet kind, the shameful kind. Men in their 20s with no degree, no job, no guidance. Wandering between gig apps, YouTube rabbit holes, and self-disgust. See, young men aren't lazy, they're untethered. Raised in a world where all the ladders were pulled up, and only blame and masculine guilt were left behind. They didn't get their father's opportunities, but they were told they were privileged, while working dead-end jobs that don't pay the rent in cities where dating, status, and success now belong only to the elite. These men aren't failing to become providers. They were never shown how, never given the tools needed. No apprenticeships, no rituals, no path to dignity. Just porn, pills, and society ritualistically humiliating them. The future is female. Men should be silent. White men are, black men are. You've seen these headlines. These talking points. Lies. Meant to be internalized by men to ensure there's no resistance to the system. Some will bristle at this emasculation idea, but the moment they feel that unease deep in their gut, they'll know that this isn't propaganda, it's a traumatic memory resurfacing. The truth shall set you free. So let us speak of the most pernicious lie of all. Porn. The word being scrubbed from YouTube, as if erasing the word will erase the damage that is done and is doing. I speak to you now as someone who is deeply affected by this, as many young men were. Exposed to adult content as young boys, too young to process what they were seeing, too young to know what real intimacy was supposed to be. These sites pushed degenerate content on boys and men with no real age restrictions. Before many of them could form their masculinity, they were emasculated. Some barely old enough to understand how their own bodies worked were exposed to explicit content that rewired their minds before they had the chance to form dignity, desire, or healthy intimacy. Masculinity wasn't stolen in a single blow, it was stripped away. One frame, one click, one conditioned humiliation at a time. Let me show you how. It was done in 3 steps. Step 1, conditioning the soul before contact. Before men or young boys had ever even kissed a woman in real life, they were conditioned to imagine themselves as powerless in the eyes of the one. Taught that pleasure belonged to others while they watched from the margins, from their bed with iPhones. Step 2, internalizing a role of defeat. See, the scripts that porn offered, that they absorbed, they weren't stories of love, they were rituals of defeat. Tales of men being silenced, sidelined, shamed, cheated on. These weren't videos of healthy intimacy. There are videos whispering a message. This is your role, learn it well. Step 3. Shattering identity at the root. Porn didn't just twist desire, it rewrites identity. It taught boys to see themselves not as lovers or leaders, but as shadows in someone else's fantasy. Most young men's only experience of women comes from explicit content or feminist lectures. One teaches men to lust, the other teaches men that their own women hate them. Neither teaches them how to be loved. Because it isn't just porn, privilege, or shame, it's the message of an entire culture. And when they finally break, no one asks, "What's wrong with young men?" They just nod, shake their heads, and say, "Men today, they're all little boys, irresponsible, lazy, toxic, privileged." Because emasculating young men today isn't only accepted, it's actively encouraged. Societies have always needed a scapegoat, and young men have been placed upon the altar. Men weren't just abandoned, they were blamed for a system that trained them to fail, shamed them for that failure, then laughed at their suffering. So, what's wrong with young men? They have come to the slow realization that their world has no place for them, that their own culture and women seem to hate them, that they've been emasculated, disempowered, spiritually neutered, and it was all done to them by their own communities, by the people who were supposed to love and protect them, often before they could even form their own identities. They didn't disappear, they were erased, not with violence, but with silence, shame, and substitution. And if no one tells that story, they might never come back. Now we move on to young women, empowered, then abandoned. Before we speak of what was taken from young women, let me say this very clearly. This is not condemnation, it's not shame, it's not purity culture nor moral panic, it's grief. It is a reckoning with the promises made to a generation of daughters, promises that left them more alone than ever before. If this section hurts, it's because we know you were told a lie, and we are finally saying that you deserve better. See, young women were promised empowerment. Instead, they got anxiety, birth control, and a career path that replaced family with burnout. They were told to chase freedom, but never told what freedom costs when it comes without love, without roots, without family. The system taught women to resent men, then gave them no one worth trusting, taught them to scorn tradition, then left them childless, exhausted, and whispering, "Where did everyone go?" They were told that you don't need a man, but never warned what happens when you want a man and you can't find one. They were told career first, family later, but no one said that later doesn't last forever, that biology has a clock and loneliness has teeth. They were told to be everything: mother, CEO, lover, philosopher, activist, but never shown how to be anything with peace or joy or rest. And when they cried out in anxiety and depression and confusion, they weren't offered comfort. They were handed pills, SSRIs, diagnoses, cheap spiritual wish fulfillment. And when that failed, they were handed slogans: self-care is resistance, boss babe, shadow work. But slogans don't hold you at night. Careers don't sing to your children, and empowerment isn't worth much when your soul feels empty and used, and your womb echoes with the memory of a child that never had. The lie wasn't just that women could have it all. The lie was that they'd want what the system offered them. Now thousands wake up at 30 or 40, staring at degrees, bank accounts, and empty apartments, whispering, "Why do I feel so alone?" They were told their bodies were their own, that power came from how many eyes they could catch. But no one warned them, being seen isn't the same as being loved, and being desired by many often means being cherished by none. Sex became cheap, not because women were cheap, but because they were told it was freedom, that giving themselves away would make them strong, when it only left them feeling hollow. Because sex without reverence isn't power, it's consumption, and what is consumed is discarded. They were never told that bonding is biological, that every man who enters them also leaves something behind, that the body remembers what the mind tries to forget. What was once meant to make them sacred was used to make them ordinary. And when they ask why it hurts, why no man looks at them like they're rare anymore, they're told to own it, make it part of their identity, to rebrand their grief as confidence, to smile wider, wear less, and post more. But inside, Something sacred is dimmed. Not because they're broken, but because they were lied to. They were taught that modesty was oppression, that guarding their hearts was weakness, and that tradition was bondage. And now they weep in bathroom stalls, between brunch and smiles, scroll through dating apps that rank them like products, where every match feels more like judgment than connection. And then they stare into the mirror whispering, "What happened to me?" But here's the truth. This wasn't your fault. You were lied to, by the same system that lied to the men. The system that told you that power was sex, told men that love was weakness. The same system that told you not to trust men, told men they were unworthy of being trusted. Men and women were never each other's enemies, but they made sure you never became allies. And now men and women suffer apart, both aching with the same grief, different in shape but identical in root. You both were betrayed by those who should have protected you. And if you're watching this and you feel that lump in your throat, that ache rising, that unbearable grief, don't turn away, because somewhere out there, there's a young man or a young woman watching this video, and they're feeling the same thing. Not hatred, but recognition. And maybe that's where healing begins. And finally, we reach the last demographic to be affected by the elites, to be destroyed in real time. The middle class, bled from both ends. The middle class wasn't just betrayed, it was targeted, not by one party, but by the system itself. Too independent to control, too rooted to replace, and too proud to conform. So they were taxed, regulated, mocked, and displaced. Bled from both ends by elites who needed their labor but hated their values. They became a threat, not because they were violent, but because they remembered how to build, how to fix, how to live without dependence on technocratic approval. So they were shamed, labeled backwards, bigoted, bitter, the deplorables, the anti-vaxxers, the cleaners to guns and Bibles, as if tradition was poison, as if faith was ignorance, as if working with your hands was beneath those who build nothing at all. They were the men who knew how to lay a foundation, the women who raised 3 kids without daycare, the families that prayed before dinner and taught their children to mean what they say. But they were punished for being rooted, because in a world adrift, even standing still becomes an act of war. So their towns were hollowed out, their children seduced by cities, their morals turned into punchlines on late-night shows. They didn't vanish, they were exiled. Out of the institutions they built, the schools they funded, the country they thought was still theirs. But they were the spine of the nation, and when the spine snaps, the whole body falls. They were exiled quietly, not with tanks but with zoning laws, not with soldiers but with subsidies, banished not from the land but from its promise. What remained? Ghost towns with silent factories and fading dreams. Schools that still fly the flag, but no longer teach what it meant. And in the hollowed places, something else crept in. Despair. Drugs poured in, first prescriptions, then poison. Oxy, fentanyl, heroin. They called it an epidemic, but it was a harvest. And the crops were the sons and fathers, the mothers who couldn't bear the pain, and the grandparents raising grandkids while the system watched and shrugged at their pain. Mental health slogans replaced real help. Small towns were told to raise awareness, as if awareness alone could bring back a job, or bring a factory back, or bring a father back. And still the elite sneered. You should have learned to code, as if a man who builds engines can debug JavaScript, as if a welder should become a TikTok influencer. But what they broke wasn't just an economy, it was a people, a way of life. A covenant that once said, if you work hard, build strong, and do what's right, and you keep your word, you will be safe, happy, and successful. That covenant is broken, and no one in Washington mourned it because they were too busy selling off the pieces. They replaced dignity with compliance, they replaced work with welfare, and they called it progress. And worst of all, they told us to be grateful for it. Just more betrayal, followed by gaslighting. They broke the back of the middle class, and then blamed them for crawling. And while we bled, they built empires. While we sacrificed, they sneered. They made the ruin and they called it equity. They wrote the script and they mocked us for refusing to play our part. But make no mistake, this was not an accident, it was design. And the architects of that design now feast on the banquet of our decline. Rome's senators bankrupted the people to preserve their privileges. Our elites did the same, outsourcing labor, devaluing citizenship, dismantling the family, and demoralizing the youth, then branding the entire wreckage as progress. They don't build, they don't serve, they manage decline like landlords of a crumbling empire, sipping wine in Aspen, drafting white papers on how best to regulate the ruins they engineered. They will not fix it, they will not save you, they do not intend to, because they have already cashed out. They've already bought real estate in New Zealand, they invested in surveillance, not stability, in private security and not public safety. Smart cities, not strong communities. They wrote off the future of the nation and then they handed you the bill. The generational debt is yours now. Not just in dollars, but in broken trust, broken homes, broken spirits. They shattered your family, then mocked you for loneliness. They rewired your desires, then blamed you for what they planted. They made you suffer, and then they made you thank them. They didn't just leave you with the wreckage. They rewrote the story and convinced you it was your fault. Now they sip champagne on the deck of a sinking ship and have the gall to call it all progress. So, is America Rome? I'll leave that up to you. But what can I tell you is that this isn't history. This is your house on fire. This is our house on fire. Now what are we going to do about it?